Hey there, loser. Derek's voice thundered through the small living room, snapping Ethan out of his quiet evening routine. Of all people, Derek Stanton, Madison's arrogant, self-assured boss, was the last person Ethan expected to see strolling through his front door. Yet here he was, making himself at home, tossing his jacket onto the sofa without so much as acknowledging Ethan. Ethan sat there, frozen in place, as Derek's words sank in. The man had barged in uninvited and called him a loser right in his own home. "I'm talking to you," Derek sneered, his gaze locked on Ethan with an intensity that made his skin crawl. "Listen up, loser, I'm taking your wife out for a wild night, and I'll be keeping her satisfied till morning. You don't get a say in this. She's worked hard and deserves a treat, the kind you clearly can't give her. Face it, I'm doing her a favor." A chill snaked up Ethan's spine, his mind racing as he tried to process the words. Before he could say a word, he heard the sharp, deliberate click of high heels from upstairs. Turning, he watched as Madison appeared at the top of the staircase, wearing a red dress that hugged her figure, her lips painted in a bold crimson. She paused, glancing down at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Then, as her eyes found Derek's, she let a slight smile escape, almost like they were sharing some private joke. "Hey, babe," Derek called up to her, his voice warm, eager. "Ready for a real night out?" Ethan felt his throat tighten as Madison looked over at him, the man she'd been with for nearly a decade, and shrugged with a casual, dismissive air. "He's right, Ethan," she said, adjusting a loose strand of hair, her tone almost mocking. "He's right. I love the way he makes me feel, you wouldn't understand. Tonight's going to be amazing. Don't wait up for dinner. I'll be back whenever we're done." Ethan's stomach churned, a mixture of anger and shock seizing him. He opened his mouth, searching for something, anything, to say, but his voice caught, too stunned to form the words. How could she stand there, in their home, and speak like that without an ounce of shame? "Madison, what's going on?" he managed, fists clenching at his sides. "After everything, you're just walking out with him like this?" She looked at him with a mix of pity and irritation, as though he were some naive child who didn't get it. "It's not that simple, Ethan. Derek appreciates me. He gives me what I need, things you just can't. He knows how to make me feel alive. He's taking me out tonight because he understands what I'm missing, things you wouldn't understand." Ethan's face drained of color, his jaw clenching as her words cut deeper. I thought I was enough." Derek laughed, the sound grating and smug, twisting the knife. "Enough? Look at yourself. She's been waiting for you to be the man she deserves, but you're too settled in this boring little life. Madison needs excitement, and you're not even close." He turned to Madison, extending his hand with a smile. "Ready?" Madison stepped down the last few steps, her heels echoing against the floor. She took his hand without hesitation, her posture proud, gaze unwavering. "You know," Ethan said, his voice barely audible, thick with hurt. "I trusted you. We built this life together. I gave you everything I had." Madison barely looked back, her hand already intertwined with Derek's. "Sometimes, Ethan, everything just isn't enough." She adjusted her hair one last time, casting him a final glance that held none of the warmth he once knew. "Dinner's in the fridge. Don't wait up." As she and Derek moved toward the door, Ethan felt himself rooted to the spot, a mix of anger, pain, and disbelief boiling inside him. The air felt heavy, suffocating. He wanted to shout, to tell them to stop, but all he could do was stand there, silent, as Derek shot him one last smirk before they disappeared into the night. "Maybe you should get used to spending nights alone, Ethan. It's just the reality now," Derek sneered, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Your wife deserves a real man, and I think we both know who that is." With those final words, the door clicked shut, leaving Ethan in a silence that felt almost deafening. He stood there for a long moment, Derek's mocking laughter echoing in his mind, haunting him. Closing his eyes, he replayed Madison's dismissive look, her cruel words that dripped with contempt. The weight of her betrayal pressed down on him, cold and heavy. Slowly, he sank onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands as he grappled with the rawness of what had just unfolded. The woman he loved, the woman he thought he knew, had walked out without a backward glance, choosing fleeting thrills over the steady love he'd built for them. After a long moment, he lifted his head, his expression hardening with resolve. This wasn't the end for him. His world might have crumbled in an instant, but he wasn't going to stay broken. Ethan clenched his jaw, his eyes narrowing with a fierce determination. "Madison, you think this is over," he murmured to the empty room. "You have no idea what's coming." The silence in the house felt thick, oppressive, as he sat motionless, his gaze fixed on the spot where they had stood, their taunting words echoing in his mind, deepening the sting of betrayal. Ethan replayed every detail, Derek's smug grin, Madison's look of disdain, the absolute arrogance in their voices. "She deserves a taste of her own medicine," he muttered, his voice low and steady. He took a deep breath, feeling the humiliation and pain transform into something colder, more precise. He wasn't going to let this go unanswered. Hours slipped by as he sat alone, his thoughts spiraling. Memories flashed through his mind, all the times he'd put Madison first, every sacrifice he'd made for their life together. But tonight, with the fresh sting of her betrayal, he realized it wasn't just his trust she'd shattered, she had shown him a complete lack of respect, tossing him aside without a second thought. The next morning, Ethan woke up with a sense of clear determination. Madison might think she could just walk all over him, but she would soon find out she had sorely underestimated him. His revenge wouldn't be some heated outburst, it would be calculated, meticulous, something that would make them both regret every insult, every laugh at his expense. The first step was gathering information, learning their habits. He knew Madison well enough to predict her movements, the places she frequented, the routines she clung to. Derek, however, was another story. Ethan would have to dig deeper to uncover what mattered most to him and find the cracks in his seemingly perfect armor. Ethan's first stop was a local cafe where Madison often started her mornings before heading to work. He arrived early, picking a spot by the window with a clear view of the entrance. Right on schedule, Madison walked in, her gaze drifting casually around the room. She wore a dress he hadn't seen before, a gift from Derek, no doubt, stirring up a fresh wave of resentment. Ethan watched as she took a seat and pulled out her phone, her face lighting up at a new message. He clenched his fists, imagining it was from Derek. But he kept his anger in check, staying calm and observant, taking mental notes of every detail, her order, her favorite seat, her expressions. All of it would come in handy, small pieces of a larger plan. By the second day, Ethan's strategy had started to take shape. He knew that Derek ran his own business and had a reputation for cutting corners. If there were any weaknesses in Derek's life, they'd be lurking in the shadows of his business practices. Ethan would uncover every dirty deal, every hidden fault Derek tried to bury. Ethan started dedicating his nights to digging deeper, following every lead he could find online, and making a few strategic calls to people who might know Derek's history. He reached out to an old friend in finance, casually hinting that he was considering a business deal with Derek's company. His friend's response spoke volumes: "Stay away from that guy. Shady as they come. He's been investigated for tax evasion more than once, but somehow he always wriggles out of it." That was all Ethan needed to hear. He spent hours poring over public records, news articles, and industry forums, slowly piecing together a timeline of Derek's dubious practices. He uncovered whispers of fraud, embezzled funds, and bribes to regulatory officials. "Derek, you've been busy," Ethan muttered, a small, satisfied smile forming. He knew he'd found exactly what he was looking for. The following morning, Ethan tailed Derek to his office, a sleek glass building in the heart of the city's financial district. Parking across the street, he watched Derek saunter out of his car, smirking as he greeted his employees. The sight of that smug grin made Ethan's blood boil, but it also reignited his sense of purpose. He was going to find a way into Derek's fortress. That evening, Ethan reached out to an old college buddy, Matt, who had a job in cybersecurity. "Hey, Matt, I need a favor," he said, keeping his tone light. "It's complicated, but let's just say it involves a guy who has it coming." Matt chuckled. "Sounds intriguing. What kind of favor are we talking about?" "I need access to some files. Nothing that can be traced back to me, but it has to be discreet. Can you do it?" Matt hesitated but eventually agreed. "All right, send me what you have, and I'll see what I can do. Just be careful, okay?" That night, Ethan sent over everything he'd collected, business records, employee contacts, and even a rumor about an offshore account. With Matt's help, he knew he'd get the proof he needed to dismantle Derek's empire. A week later, Matt delivered. He provided Ethan with files packed with incriminating evidence, fraudulent transactions, fake invoices, and, most damning of all, documentation of a slush fund Derek used to bribe officials. It was everything Ethan needed to destroy Derek's business, shatter his reputation, and possibly put him behind bars. Now, he just had to time it perfectly. Ethan spent that week meticulously preparing for the grand finale of the twisted drama Madison and Derek had unknowingly cast him in. Every night, he reviewed the evidence he'd gathered, the financial reports, hidden accounts, emails tying Derek to a laundry list of crimes. The deeper he dug, the more he realized just how corrupt Derek truly was. The scope of it was staggering, and each new revelation only strengthened Ethan's resolve. He needed the perfect stage for the reveal, a public downfall, something they'd have no way of escaping. The idea came to him one night as he lay in bed, replaying past conversations with Madison. She would never see it coming, her pride had blinded her to the man she'd underestimated. As for Derek, his arrogance would ensure he walked right into Ethan's trap. And so, Ethan crafted his invitation, an olive branch on the surface, but in reality, the trigger for his revenge. The night of the dinner arrived. Ethan dressed with care, choosing a navy suit that conveyed confidence, his expression calm and welcoming. He set the table meticulously, ensuring the wine glasses were perfectly aligned and each plate arranged just so. Everything was designed to put them at ease, to make them feel secure. A knock at the door shattered the quiet. Taking a steadying breath, Ethan opened it to see Derek and Madison standing there. Derek, dressed in a sharp blazer, had that ever-present smug grin, his arm draped casually over Madison's shoulders. Madison, wearing a fitted black dress, looked around the house with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Ethan," Madison said, her tone carrying a hint of hesitation. "Thanks for inviting us." With a warm smile, Ethan gestured for them to come inside. "Please, come in. Tonight's all about putting things behind us, right?" Derek let out a mocking chuckle as he stepped in, his eyes scanning the meticulously arranged dinner table. "It's about time you wised up, Ethan. Not everyone's cut out to keep up with a woman like Madison." He squeezed her shoulder possessively. "But looks like you've finally accepted that." Ethan nodded, his expression calm. "Trust me, Derek, I've come to terms with a lot recently." Madison glanced around, still wary, though Ethan's relaxed demeanor seemed to ease her suspicions. "It looks nice, Ethan. You didn't have to go through all this trouble." Ethan shrugged, pouring wine into their glasses as they took their seats. "Oh, it was no trouble at all. I wanted tonight to be memorable for all of us." They settled in, and Ethan lifted his glass with a polite smile aimed at Derek. "To new beginnings." Derek clinked his glass against Ethan's, smirking with satisfaction. "New beginnings. Cheers to that." The initial conversation was light, with Ethan steering the topics to casual subjects, encouraging Derek to brag about his career and Madison to share trivial updates. Ethan leaned in, feigning interest, nodding and contributing just enough to keep them going. Beneath it all, his true intentions remained hidden, waiting for the perfect moment to emerge. The evening progressed smoothly, with Ethan playing the role of the perfect host. Laughter and casual chatter filled the room, making it feel like any ordinary dinner, as if nothing lurked beneath the surface. Derek, ever the self-assured guest, leaned back with his wine glass, recounting stories of recent business deals, while Madison wore a strained smile, trying to mask her unease. "Do you remember that trip to the mountains a few years ago, Madison?" Ethan asked, a nostalgic smile crossing his face. "The one where we got lost and ended up at that little cabin with the hot chocolate by the fire?" Madison nodded, shifting in her seat. "Yes, I remember." Ethan poured her another glass of wine, his face thoughtful. "Funny how things change, isn't it? One day you think you know someone, and the next, they're practically a stranger." Derek smirked, casting a glance at Madison. "Some people just need more excitement in life, Ethan. Maybe that's where you fell short." Ethan chuckled, though his gaze held an intensity beneath it. "Maybe, Derek. But sometimes, that excitement comes with consequences." As they finished the main course, Ethan set his fork down and spoke, his tone shifting subtly. "You know, Derek, it's interesting that you bring up excitement. I stumbled across something recently that was exciting." Derek raised an eyebrow, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "Oh. Do tell." Ethan leaned back, taking a measured sip of wine. "Lately, I've been thinking a lot about life choices, what's important." He paused, letting his words settle, then added, almost casually, "I've even had a few people look into new business opportunities." Derek's expression tightened, though he tried to play it off. "Really?" Ethan nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "It's surprising what you can find out about people these days, things they thought were hidden." Derek's smirk faltered, but he shrugged, keeping his tone dismissive. "When you're at the top, people are always looking to dig up dirt. It comes with the territory." "True enough," Ethan agreed, leaning back in his chair. "Must be tough keeping everything above board with the kind of money you're pulling in." Madison cast a worried glance at Derek, who waved it off, his smile forced. "I've got nothing to hide. My business is solid." "Oh, I'm sure it is," Ethan replied smoothly. "But I came across something curious during my own research." He reached for a folder beside him, setting it on the table and tapping it lightly. "It's amazing what you can uncover when you know the right people, like offshore accounts, for example." A tense silence fell over the room. Derek's smile faded as he leaned forward, his voice low. "What exactly are you getting at, Ethan?" Ethan met his gaze, his expression hardening at last. "I'm saying I know exactly how you've been funding that extravagant lifestyle of yours. Shady investments, fraudulent accounts, offshore slush funds, and I've got all the proof right here." He tapped the folder again, his eyes never leaving Derek's face. Madison's face drained of color as she looked from Ethan to Derek, realization dawning in her widened eyes. "Derek, what is he talking about?" Derek clenched his jaw, his glare fixed on Ethan. "This is pathetic. You're so bitter that you'd sink this low." Ethan let out a quiet laugh. "You barged into my home, paraded your affair in front of me like a trophy, called me a loser right to my face. Did you honestly think I'd just let that go?" Madison reached for Derek's arm, her voice trembling. "Derek, please, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you're not involved in anything illegal." Derek shook her hand off, his face twisted in anger. "This is a setup. Ethan's just a bitter man trying to drag us down because he can't handle reality." Ethan leaned forward, his voice calm but chilling. "Oh, I know plenty, Derek. Like the offshore accounts you've got stashed in the Caymans to siphon company funds without a trace. And the shell companies, fake invoices, and bribes, the whole operation." Derek's face paled, a flicker of fear breaking through his bravado. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, struggling to keep his composure. "You don't know what you're talking about," he muttered, casting a warning look at Madison, whose face had gone ghostly white. "Oh, I know more than enough," Ethan said, reaching for the folder beside him. He slid it across the table toward Derek. "Go ahead. Take a look. I've got it all right here, records, transactions, a few cozy emails with your business associates." Reluctantly, Derek took the folder and began flipping through the pages. With each sheet, his expression darkened, the confidence slipping away. Madison turned to Ethan, her voice shaking. "Ethan, please, we can talk about this. There's no need to do it this way." Ethan met her gaze, his face cold and unyielding. "Madison, you threw our life away for a man you thought could give you everything. Did you ever stop to wonder what he was really offering, or were you too blinded by the thrill of it all?" Regret clouded her eyes. "Ethan, I'm sorry. I know I hurt you, but we can still fix this." Ethan shook his head, his voice resolute. "There's no fixing what's broken here, Madison. Not after what you two did." Finally snapping out of his stunned silence, Derek pushed the folder away with a sneer. "So, what's your plan, Ethan? Think you can scare me with some documents? Go on, take it to the authorities. See if they even care." Ethan laughed softly, unfazed by Derek's bravado. "Oh, I plan to. But that's not all. I've already made sure that your most valuable clients are in the loop about what's been happening behind the scenes. I'm sure they'll be thrilled to learn about your little mismanagement scheme." Derek's jaw clenched, his mask of arrogance slipping. "You wouldn't dare." "Oh, I've already dared," Ethan replied, crossing his arms. "The emails have been sent, the documents shared. By tomorrow morning, you'll have more than just the authorities on your back." Madison gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Ethan, please don't do this. I know you're angry, and I understand, but there's no need to ruin everything." Ethan looked at her, his gaze hardened by the hurt she'd caused. "Madison, this was your choice. You chose him. You chose this life. Now you'll live with the consequences." Realizing the gravity of Ethan's words, Derek turned to Madison, a hint of desperation in his voice. "Did you know about this? About what he's done?" Madison shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "No. I had no idea." Ethan glanced between them, a small, humorless smile on his lips. "Ironic, isn't it? You built your little fantasy on lies, and now it's all coming down around you. You wanted excitement, Derek. Well, here it is." Derek's face contorted with rage as he lunged forward, slamming his fist onto the table. "You think you're so clever, don't you, Ethan? Think you've won? I'll fight this with every dollar I have. You'll regret ever coming after me." Ethan remained calm, unmoved. "I've thought through every scenario, Derek. I know exactly how you operate. Go ahead, fight all you want, but with evidence this solid, no amount of money is going to save you. The truth always has a way of catching up, doesn't it?" Madison clutched Derek's arm, her voice trembling. "Derek, what are we supposed to do? This could ruin us." Derek pulled away, anger flashing in his eyes. "Don't worry. We'll handle this. I'm not going down without a fight." Ethan gave them both one last look, his voice calm yet resolute. "This is my goodbye to the two of you. You chose a path filled with lies and deceit. Now, you'll deal with the consequences together." He stood from the table, walked to the door, and gestured for them to leave. They followed, Derek muttering threats under his breath, while Madison walked in silence, her expression a mix of anger, guilt, and helplessness. As they reached the door, Ethan turned to face them one final time. "Good luck, Derek. You're going to need it." With that, he shut the door behind them, sealing their fate. Standing alone in the quiet of his empty home, he felt an unexpected sense of liberation wash over him. The betrayal, the heartache, all of it felt like a distant memory now. For the first time in months, he felt free. Ethan's carefully crafted plan had triggered a cascade of events, unraveling Derek's life piece by piece. Within days, the once smug CEO found himself under intense investigation. His accounts were frozen, and his name splashed across headlines for fraud and embezzlement. Banks that had once catered to him were now cutting ties, and his so-called loyal clients vanished the moment scandal hit. The empire he built up with such pride was now collapsing around him, and there was no one left to answer his desperate calls. As the investigation closed in, Derek's arrogance dissolved into desperation. He lashed out at everyone around him, including Madison, who became a target for his mounting frustration. Each day, his calls grew more frantic, his accusations more bitter. "This is your fault," he shouted one night, pacing the lavish penthouse that now felt like a cage. "I've lost everything. It's all gone." Madison, who had once basked in the luxury and thrill Derek provided, now shrank under his scornful gaze. "Derek, I didn't ask for any of this. You said everything was taken care of. You promised no one could touch you." He sneered, his face twisted with contempt. "And you believed it, didn't you? Like a fool. You and your reward for betraying your husband." He laughed bitterly, his voice laced with resentment. "Congratulations, Madison. We ruined each other." Madison had nowhere left to turn. Her attempt to build a new life with Derek had left her estranged from everyone she once knew, her family, her friends, and now, even her own self-respect. Unable to contain her own panic, she grabbed her coat, muttered something about needing air, and walked out into the night. The following evening, overwhelmed by despair, Madison found herself standing on Ethan's doorstep, her heart pounding. She'd stood here countless times before, once as his wife, now as a woman barely holding on to the last fragments of her dignity. She knew she had no right to come back, not after the way she had left, but she was out of options, and every fiber of her being was aching for some sense of comfort, of familiarity. Taking a deep breath, she raised her hand and knocked on the door. When the door opened, Ethan's face was calm and composed, his expression unreadable. He looked down at her, saying nothing, though a guardedness lingered in his eyes. He waited in silence, letting her be the one to speak first. "Ethan," she managed, her voice cracking as she fought for the right words. "Please, I need to talk to you." He crossed his arms, leaning casually against the door frame. "Then talk." She stepped forward, her face crumpling as the tears she'd held back finally spilled over. "I know I don't deserve it, but I made a huge mistake, Ethan. I was swept up in everything Derek promised me. I thought it was what I wanted, but it was all just lies." He listened, his gaze unwavering. "What exactly did you think you'd find, Madison?" Her shoulders sagged as she took a shaky breath, her voice breaking. "I was wrong, Ethan. So wrong. And now everything is falling apart. He's lost everything, and he's turned on me. I can't do this anymore." She reached out, her hand resting on his arm. "Please, Ethan. Give me another chance. I can't go through this without you." Ethan looked down at her hand on his arm, then gently removed it, his tone even and calm. "You threw us away, Madison. You thought Derek could give you more, so you didn't hesitate to walk out on everything we built." Her tears fell faster, desperation lacing her voice. "I was foolish, Ethan. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. I miss you, I miss us. Can't we try to fix it?" He shook his head, letting out a quiet sigh. "It's too late for that, Madison. I've spent months picking up the pieces of the life you shattered, building something new for myself that doesn't include you. You have no idea what that's been like." He paused, his voice thick with the pain of memory. "You weren't just my wife. You were my best friend. And you broke that trust like it meant nothing." Madison's face crumpled, and she dropped her gaze, unable to look him in the eye. I thought you'd be fine. I thought you'd move on. He gave a hollow chuckle, empty of warmth. Move on. You broke my trust, Madison. I don't think you understand what that means. I trusted you with my life, and you threw it all away. Now you expect me to pretend none of it happened? She bit her lip, nodding. I know it's a lot to ask, but if we could just try. No, Madison, he interrupted, his tone firm. Trying would only bring more pain to both of us. I'm not the man you thought you could leave behind anymore. I found peace, and I'm not going to give that up again. Her shoulders shook as she clung to the last slivers of hope. Please, Ethan, I can't go back to him. He's blaming me for everything, turning it all on me. I need you. Ethan watched her for a moment, a flicker of both pity and anger crossing his face. You made your choice, Madison. You chose him over me. Now you can go back to what's left of that decision. Desperately, she reached for his arm again, her voice breaking. Ethan, please, don't do this. You don't understand how miserable I am. I can't sleep, I can't think. I feel like I'm drowning. He took her hand off his arm, holding it for a brief moment before letting it go. No, Madison, you don't understand. I gave you everything, and it still wasn't enough. I've moved on. Now you need to do the same. Madison's face went pale, her voice barely more than a whisper. So, that's it? You're really done with me? He looked at her for a long moment, a glimmer of sadness in his eyes. You made your choice, Madison. Now live with it. Her lip trembled as she stared at him, realizing how final his words were. Backing away, her hands shaking, she turned toward the door, the full weight of her actions settling on her shoulders. The life she had traded for a fleeting thrill was lost forever, and the man she had once loved was gone from her reach for good. As Madison stepped outside, the chill of the night air hit her, and a sob escaped her lips, the weight of her loss settling painfully in her chest. She'd left behind everything good, and now there was no turning back. Inside, Ethan closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling a long, steady breath. He stood there, taking in the quiet of his home, feeling an odd sense of peace in the finality of it all. It was as if he had finally closed a chapter that had weighed heavily on him for far too long. Moving through the house, he noticed the framed photos still lining the hallway, memories of his life with Madison frozen in happier times. He picked up one, looking at their smiling faces, locked in a moment of joy that now felt distant. After a pause, he set the photo face down on the table, then walked to the window, watching as Madison's figure slowly faded into the distance. For the first time in what felt like forever, he felt truly free. He had weathered the heartbreak, moved through the pain, and reclaimed his life as his own. The morning sunlight streamed into Ethan's new apartment, casting a warm glow across the room. He took a sip of his coffee, savoring the quiet satisfaction of his new beginning. The past few months had reshaped him, quietly but profoundly, and for the first time, he felt completely in control of his future. His days were now free from the tension and bitterness that had once filled his marriage. Instead, he embraced simple pleasures, experimenting with new recipes, joining a local running group, even sketching again, a hobby he hadn't touched in years. He reconnected with old friends, strengthening bonds that had faded in the last turbulent years with Madison. One evening, at a local art gallery opening, he met someone unexpected. Her name was Lily, a down-to-earth photographer with a warm laugh and a relaxed, genuine presence. They crossed paths while admiring the same piece of art. "Oh, sorry," Lily laughed, glancing at Ethan with a playful smile. "Didn't mean to hog the spot." "No problem," Ethan replied, a grin spreading across his face. "Looks like we've got similar taste." They struck up an easy conversation, the words flowing as naturally as breathing. She was passionate, curious, and interested in him for who he really was. Over a couple of drinks, they shared stories, and Ethan felt a sense of ease that he hadn't felt in a long time. This wasn't about escaping anything, it was about connecting with someone who appreciated him, imperfections and all. Days turned into weeks, and he and Lily continued seeing each other, sharing laughter and quiet moments without the weight of expectations. For the first time, Ethan felt he could truly be himself, and that was more than enough. While Ethan's life blossomed, Madison's world had become a series of struggles. The luxury she once took for granted was gone, replaced by an unfamiliar, sobering desperation. With Derek's legal troubles splashed across the news, he had vanished, leaving her to face the fallout. The penthouse, her designer clothes, the extravagant lifestyle, all repossessed, seized by authorities, or sold off to cover debts. For the first time in years, she found herself searching for a job, a mix of fear and disbelief gnawing at her. She'd relied on the comfort of wealth and status, doors that had always opened effortlessly. Now, those doors were firmly shut. She sent out dozens of applications, attended interview after interview, only to face polite rejections and wary glances. Her connection to Derek had become common knowledge, and few companies were willing to risk the scandal attached to her name. One night, weary and worn down by exhaustion and frustration, Madison found herself outside Ethan's building again. She hadn't seen him since their last encounter, but she held on to a faint hope that he might still show her some small kindness. Only during their last conversation had she fully grasped the depth of the hurt she'd caused, seeing the strength he'd built in her absence. The Ethan she remembered had been gentle, forgiving. She had counted on that version of him. As fate would have it, Ethan was returning home from dinner with Lily just then and noticed Madison waiting by the entryway. She looked drained, her eyes reflecting the emptiness of someone who'd lost everything. He paused, meeting her gaze with a blend of empathy and detachment. "Ethan," she started, her voice trembling. "I know I don't deserve it, but, could we talk?" He regarded her, not with anger but with the calm understanding of someone who had already moved on. "Madison, there's nothing left to talk about. We've already been through this." Tears filled her eyes as she took a step closer. "Please, Ethan. I don't have anyone left. I don't even know how I ended up here." He sighed, feeling a flicker of sympathy but remaining resolute. "Madison, I tried to show you that a long time ago. You chose a life I couldn't give you, and now that's gone. You made your choices." She nodded slowly, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I know. I was so foolish, so selfish, and now I have nothing left." Her voice cracked as she looked up at him, realizing that the man she had once overlooked now symbolized the stability she'd never appreciated. "Could we just talk, even if it's only for a few minutes?" He hesitated, considering her plea. The old Ethan might have let her inside, might have listened and reopened old wounds, but that person was gone. Instead, he answered with a firm yet gentle tone. "Madison, I'm with someone now. Someone who values me for who I am, without the games or conditions. You can't expect me to step back into your world after everything that's happened." Her face fell, absorbing his words. I understand." She backed away, finally realizing there was no undoing the choices she had made. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I'm truly sorry." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving him in the quiet of the night. He watched her go, feeling a sense of closure he hadn't anticipated. The weight of the past had lifted, freeing him to embrace his future fully. In the weeks that followed, Ethan immersed himself in a new chapter of life, one filled with genuine joy and connection. Lily brought a lightness and warmth to his days, and together they built a relationship grounded in mutual respect and trust. They traveled, shared deep conversations late into the night, and tackled new challenges side by side, each step affirming that Ethan was exactly where he needed to be. One evening, after a cozy dinner at their favorite bistro, Lily reached across the table and took his hand. "I know you've been through a lot, Ethan," she said softly, her eyes warm and steady, "but I want you to know that I see you, the real you. And I'm grateful to be part of this journey with you." Ethan squeezed her hand, a content smile spreading across his face. "Thank you, Lily. For everything. I feel like I've finally found the life I was meant to have." With each passing day, their bond grew stronger, and Ethan found himself letting go of the bitterness that had once gripped his heart. He realized that while betrayal had shattered his old life, it had also led him to a profound understanding of himself and what he truly wanted. In Lily, he had found not only a new beginning but a sense of peace he had longed for, one that was rooted in trust, love, and the quiet joy of being fully seen. Meanwhile, Madison struggled to accept her new reality. Her days were filled with odd jobs, minimum-wage paychecks, and sleepless nights haunted by the choices that had brought her here. Every day was a reminder of what she'd recklessly tossed aside, the shadow of a life she could never reclaim. Her choices had cost her dearly, leaving her with nothing but the heavy weight of regret, a lesson learned too late. For Ethan, though, this new chapter held only promise. He'd emerged from the chaos with a renewed sense of purpose and a partner who cherished him just as he was. In this newfound happiness, he finally realized that the most painful endings often paved the way for life's truest beginnings. Years slipped by, each season a constant reminder to Madison of all she'd lost and could never get back. She'd settled into a monotonous job as a cashier at a small grocery store on the edge of town. Gone were the days of luxury and comfort. Now her life was an endless series of small transactions and brief exchanges. Most days, she kept her head down, focused on the task at hand, avoiding eye contact as much as possible. But every so often, someone from her old life would pass through her line, their expressions a mix of shock and pity. Each encounter chipped away at her pride, deepening the regret that lingered like a shadow. One evening, as she trudged home through a light drizzle, Madison's mind drifted back to that fateful night she'd left Ethan standing at the door with Derek. Her choices echoed in her mind like a haunting refrain. She could still picture Ethan's face, the hurt, the disbelief, and then a hardness she hadn't recognized back then. She'd never imagined that Ethan, once so gentle and forgiving, would ever turn his back on her completely. His final words replayed in her mind, calm and final. "You threw us away, Madison. There's no coming back." Back then, she'd believed her decisions were opening the door to a better life, one she thought Ethan could never provide. Derek had promised her everything, but he left her with nothing but betrayal and ruin. When he vanished, hiding from the authorities and leaving her to face the aftermath alone, Madison was left to bear the full weight of her choices, a burden that only grew heavier with time. In stark contrast, Ethan's life had unfolded in ways he could have never anticipated. His once quiet apartment was now alive with the laughter and warmth of a new family, Lily, and their young daughter, Grace. Trust had taken time, but with Lily, it all felt natural, as though the pieces simply fell into place. Their relationship began with friendship, sharing countless late-night conversations and morning hikes, until love naturally found its way into their lives. One crisp autumn morning, Ethan, Lily, and Grace took a stroll through the nearby park, the trees ablaze with shades of orange and yellow. Grace's small hand gripped his finger tightly as she excitedly pointed out every squirrel and bird in sight. Ethan felt a profound happiness, not rooted in fantasies or lofty dreams but in the simple, cherished moments of his everyday life. Lily looked over at him as he swung Grace up into his arms, their laughter echoing through the park as her curls bounced with each step. "She adores you, you know," Lily said softly, her eyes warm with affection. "We're so lucky to have you." Ethan met her gaze, warmth blooming in his chest. "I think I'm the lucky one. I never thought I'd find this, not after everything that happened." He paused, his words carefully chosen. "Thank you for letting me be myself." She reached over, taking his hand in hers. "You've always been enough, Ethan." Her simple words held a power he'd never felt in his past. Lily saw him completely, without judgment or expectation. With her, he no longer needed to prove himself or chase approval, he was finally at peace, living a life he truly treasured. One rainy afternoon, Madison's heart skipped a beat as a familiar face appeared in her checkout line. She froze, recognizing Sarah, an old friend from her days with Derek, someone she hadn't seen in years. Sarah hesitated before offering a polite, tentative smile, setting her basket on the counter. The air between them was thick with awkwardness as they exchanged forced pleasantries. "Madison," Sarah finally said, lowering her voice, "I didn't expect to see you here." Madison gave a weak nod, her gaze fixed on the scanner. "Yeah, well, things didn't go exactly as planned," she muttered, her voice barely audible over the steady beep of the scanner. Sarah nodded, her expression hovering between pity and discomfort. "Last I heard, you and Derek, well, it seems like you've been through a lot." Madison forced a hollow smile, bitterness edging her words. "A lot is one way to put it." She considered saying more but thought better of it. This was her reality now, and the fewer people who saw the depths of it, the better. Sarah offered a quiet farewell and left, but Madison felt a surge of anger and sadness as she watched her go. To her former friends, she was now nothing more than a cautionary tale, someone whispered about at gatherings she'd never be invited to again. And the truth stung. She'd chosen this path, and there was no turning back. A few weeks later, on her way home, Madison noticed a family across the street, two parents laughing with a little girl as they played tag. As she got closer, recognition struck her. It was Ethan, his face radiant with happiness as he chased the girl, with Lily's laughter joining in. Madison stopped, her heart pounding as she watched him lift the girl and plant a gentle kiss on her forehead. The scene was beautiful and, for Madison, unbearably painful. In that single moment, she understood the full weight of everything she had lost. Ethan looked up, and his eyes met hers across the street. To her surprise, there was no anger, no bitterness. His expression was simply one of quiet recognition, as if acknowledging a stranger who had once passed through his life. He gave her a polite nod, then turned back to his family, leaving her standing alone in the cold. Madison walked away slowly, the image seared into her mind. There was no anger, no opportunity for apologies or explanations. Ethan had moved on entirely, in a way she had never expected. She was left to confront the harsh truth: he was happy, fulfilled, while she bore the full weight of her choices, the price of betrayal clear and final. In his new life, Ethan had found not only love but a peace he hadn't known was possible. The struggles he'd faced had instilled in him a resilience and strength that now guided him. With Lily and Grace, he'd built a life grounded in trust, loyalty, and genuine connection. He cherished their days together, knowing they were anchored by something real, something that couldn't be shaken. And as the years slipped by, Madison remained a distant memory, a chapter closed with finality. To Ethan, she was a reminder of mistakes endured, lessons learned, and the resilience that had carried him forward. The pain he had once known had shaped him into someone stronger, giving him a second chance to live a life founded on honesty, love, and respect. For Madison, however, life became a daily reminder of the cost of her choices. She was haunted by regrets that grew heavier with each passing year. She had once held everything in her hands, only to lose it all, now reduced to a fading memory in the life of the man she thought she could control. Ethan's journey had led him to a place of fulfillment and joy, a life where his past no longer cast shadows over his future. He had learned that, even in the aftermath of betrayal, life could offer new beginnings, if you had the courage to embrace them. And so, Ethan continued forward, leaving the pain of his past far behind, confident that he'd finally found the life he deserved.